Hello and welcome to Creators in the Cosmos. I am Jen.
And I'm Vi.
And today we are going to talk about Good Daddy Saturn. And I say good because I'm scared to say anything else.
That's super duper fair.
My Saturn has returned.
Mine is currently returning.
When I turned 27, everything started to change. Yeah, it does. So, Saturn is the planet that is ruled by the sign Capricorn. And Saturn represents kind of this energy of if you put in the work and you really push past discomfort, you will get great reward. But Saturn does not give it to you easily. And so pulling up your birth chart, seeing what sign Saturn is and then what house it is. With Saturn, you want to look at what sign it's in and what house it's in. And it can give you a lot of context to what your biggest struggles are going to be, where you've probably had a lot of insecurity and a lot of shadows that have come up. And it can sometimes leave you feeling very defeated. But Saturn takes about 29 and a half years to go back to the spot it was at when you were born. So that's considered your Saturn return, if you've ever heard that phrase. And it happens around the age of 29. It happens again at the age of 59 and then 89 if you make it that far. And yeah, I feel like the first Saturn return of your life, there's such a big change from exiting your 20s and entering your 30s. And then it's wild because you see our older generation have midlife crises very often. I think it happens right at that Saturn return. So when Saturn comes back, it either rewards you and all of a sudden something that was really challenging feels really easy, or it completely wipes the slate clean and just everything kind of falls apart in your life because you've not been listening to maybe a little itch that's been there. And then it just course corrects for you so that you can proceed into the next phase of your life. More aligned with your highest good. Okay.
Jen's going to give you all that good information, and then I can speak from my life experiences, where my Saturn knowledge comes from.
Yeah, V's living it. The astrology's been helping. It's just doesn't make it any easier, but it's perspective.
Well, and there's several other people I know who are also in the middle of theirs, so it's been really nice to compare notes and see that we're all on that struggle bus together.
For sure. And it's something we all go through. I think it's good to know kind of I would consider Saturn to be a shadow thing to look into in your chart, and I think it's important to understand it. So Saturn in the first house, usually there's a lot of pains around your self-image. There's lots of insecurity. It can feel like you had to grow up really fast. There's a lot of pressure you put on yourself, and people even can misperceive you with Saturn in the first house because it seems like you have this more rigidness or this kind of block, because Saturn is going to kind of feel more stern and kind of colder. So yeah, you have to learn a lot about self-love and letting yourself actually be expressive. My dog's a part of that.
He was just expressing himself.
Yeah. And then we have Saturn in the second house. There's usually lots of themes around your sense of self-worth, what you value. A lot of people can go through power struggles with it in the second house because it can feel like someone's taking your power away from you. Third house, there's usually a lot of wounds around communication. I've seen people have lots of learning disabilities sort of in the third house. It can be you had to learn in a different way. And then fourth house, the Saturn return has been in this. It's all themes around family and what home means to you, your sense of home, both internally and externally.
Your value system.
Yeah. And then the 5th house is the house of creativity. There can be a lot of wounds around self-expression. There can be wounds around your inner child and like letting yourself either have too much or too little fun, and just what your relationship is to those themes. I had a Saturn return in the 6th house, and the 6th house is themes around your health. That's mind, body, and spirit, your routines, what you do day to day. The 7th house, Saturn, is going to have major lessons through relationships. And yeah, I've seen definitely some good stories with Saturn in the 7th. Saturn in the 8th, there's usually like some pretty major intimacy wounds. It can be really hard to let people see the depths of you, like the messier side. There's usually a lot of resistance towards letting yourself change with Saturn there. Saturn in the 9th house goes through a lot of wounds around their belief systems, what they hold to be true and accurate for themselves. There's usually a lot of lessons around letting yourself have freedom and actually learn beyond your initial way you were taught and expand through both experience, maybe adventure. Saturn in the 10th house, wounds around career, reputation, how you're seen, feeling too seen, too exposed. Saturn in the 11th is going to be wounds around connecting in, finding your people, community, friendships. There can be a lot of limits around letting yourself like hope and dream where you want to take your future, and you can be a little more pessimistic about it. And then Saturn in the 12th house goes through a lot of psychological wounds. It can be kind of your own conscience against you, figuring out how to lean into spirituality in like a healthy way and not escape. There can be just a lot of wounds around the subconscious. So, as someone living their Saturn return, you want to share what has come to light?
Absolutely. So my Saturn return on timeline perspective started around February of 2023.
V is Saturn in Pisces.
Woo! And I haven't technically hit that conjunction yet. Like, I'm coming up to the end of it, but like you'll feel it throughout your entire. Yeah, like it gets stronger. And then it gets quieter, and then it gets louder. Anyway, so yeah, February 2023, I was working at a mass-produced bakery, just trying to like huff it out to like make day-to-day bills. And I used to, in my like early teens, early 20s, I would have like 3 or 4 jobs. I'd be grinding it out like every day, and I'd be going to the gym, and I'd be going out to party every night, and then I'd do it again tomorrow. And I was so sustainable off of that. Sustainable isn't the right word, but I did it, and I loved every second of it. But as I got closer to my mid-20s, like I was like slowing down and learning healthier coping mechanisms and a lot about my nervous system. And when I went back into like corporation work after being at a private tech company for like 3 or 4 years, like it was really hard. I realized like what I had learned about my mental health and everything, like that's just not an environment that is safe, or like just for me in general. Like, talking about how broken the system is, a whole other podcast for a different day. I started working there, and my idea was to work there for a year, like pay down some debts, then jump off the wagon. And within 90 days, I had to quit. There was no way I could make it another day in that place. And that was roughly about the time Saturn moved into Pisces. Sorry, my brain's blipping a little bit.
I can tell you your exact Saturn return.
Go ahead, do it.
Because I think the biggest thing is at the very beginning of your Saturn return, you had really just gone no contact with family. You had put boundaries because you realized the impact on your mental health.
I was starting to evaluate like my current partner and like the amount of like I was always willing to do whatever it took, and I always felt like a resistance on the other side. So like just setting all those boundaries, like it just left room for more and more boundaries to be set. The one thing that sucks about learning how to set boundaries as an adult is you can't expect people who have had unlimited access to you to suddenly respond positively to you sticking up for yourself no matter how much they love you, right? Or think they love you. And so, like, sitting down and letting certain pieces fall away and just surrendering and letting go and saying, I'm not going to, like, keep trying to swim upstream for everybody when no one I would swim upstream for would do the same for me.
That's very Saturn and Pisces too. Like the boundary lessons that come with Pisces is so real. And then, yeah, share your fourth house stuff because that is really what came up too. So, no contact with family.
No contact with family. Ended up going through a divorce this summer.
Your sense of home, like right at the beginning of Saturn return, like you were living in a smaller apartment.
So I was living with my ex and my brother and his wife. And so, like I said, I cut off a lot of my family. My brother's younger, so he hasn't really like gone through all those like boundary moments with them yet. So it put a strain on our relationship. And then on top of that, like going through the divorce with my partner, like obviously there was like me setting boundaries and just like, I'm not gonna raise someone's son, basically. And I was hoping that like putting the boundaries would like checks and balances through it all, but instead it like deteriorated. And I had told myself, I put the boundary for myself that I wasn't going to put in more than what I was being given in return, because I'll always like, I'll fill up the pot every day, even if I have nothing to give, like I'll still give it away. And like, I just didn't feel that in return. It didn't suit my needs.
The Saturn return lesson of your needs and the clarity around, I don't really feel the home I could be feeling in this environment just got really loud, I think.
I was toning myself down so much and making myself as small as needed to make everyone else comfortable. And so like I had started to realize that my entire like essence was like, I know deep down I'm a good person. Like I had done enough healing work to know that much, but then like I just constantly felt like the people who I surrounded myself with could not handle me at my 100%. And so I was constantly trying to help them expand to do that, and it just, there wasn't that same willingness. So then I decided to just contract into whatever space made it most comfortable for them. And so when I stopped contracting or swimming upstream or whatever you want to say, when I just surrendered to the whole what was happening before me, like a lot of it has sucked. Like not all of it's been super easy, but at the same time, the energies I'm being met with because I've surrendered, because I've just opened myself up to what's going on and what's going to happen. Like I have a very healthy partnership now. I spent the summer kind of sort of nomading, went where the wind blew.
Saturn fourth house.
I did so many things. We had such a great summer. It was a chaotic summer, but it was a really good summer. I touched so much grass, which is all I ever want to do when I'm in Colorado, like during the hot months.
And your main theme, I think, of the Saturn return happening still, like we definitely do a comeback around, but I think you did find home within yourself, which is like
absolutely
huge. Like you had to find it from within. Saturn wants you to learn something within that then ends up manifesting your external reality a lot differently when you learn it and you like actually integrate it deep. So for myself, my Saturn was in the sixth house, and it's so cute. My sister right now is also Saturn Pisces and is going through hers in the same house, different signs, but it's just a very funny family chart commonality. But for me, what had happened is I had health issues like my whole life in that area. So like I was always really overweight. I struggled with like ADHD, I'm autistic, and I don't feel like I got like any care or adjustments really for that growing up. So I was always terrible in school. I felt like my like needs were really never met in terms of any of those things. So I had to piece a lot of that together later. I didn't feel good most of my childhood. I was in a lot of pain. I had like lots of body issues, and then no one was really helping me with any of it, and it was just always very frustrating. I decided to just like pretty much ignore it the best that I could, but it kept getting louder as I got closer to my Saturn return, for sure, like my mental health, my physical health. And then I moved from West Virginia to Denver, and I really created for me what I called my happiness formula, where I started showing up for myself in these ways that I knew made me feel a lot better. And I started consistently doing yoga, making myself go spend time in nature and meditate. And I started holding boundaries within that. And I like the switch of improvement was like night and day. It was like so annoying that like once I like was finally able to get over the hurdles of the emotion, because I would get so frustrated. Like I go on diets and just be like, nothing ever works for me and this is stupid, and just like give up on all of it. But like dieting wasn't the answer. It was like I had no self-respect. I couldn't keep promises to myself. There was like no self-love like fueling any of it. So of course it's easy to blame every single thing else, but what I realized is processing the emotions of doing something that felt nearly impossible and doing it anyway was a huge layer of processing for me to actually end up creating that self-trust and that self-love. And I worked through a lot of that. And then my Saturn return came. And I think another big theme that came up, besides like mind and body, actually ended up doing really well as I went through my return. Felt like it got a lot easier because I had put in some work leading up to it, because it just wasn't okay. And then I think I was overworking. That was like the remaining thing, which the sixth house has a lot of themes about your work ethic in there. It's the house of Virgo. And I was definitely overworking to the point of burnout, and I ended up like losing tons of patients in the pandemic. And then it was funny, there was even my boss came up to me like the day before my Saturn return, like officially was conjunct, and he was like, I don't even know if we'll have a rehab by this point, like soon. And so it just felt like the perfect doorway to just shut down physical therapy that I had been doing for like 9 or 10 years at that time. And I took a year on the road and took a break and traveled and nomaded around for a year. And I learned a lot about my mental health. Firstly, how much I had a control problem around, like the working was masking a control problem. I couldn't sit in like stillness or like just flow, I think, ever. And I had to challenge a lot of those beliefs on my year off, and still taking care of my physical health without as much structure came up kind of again. But I also learned who I was outside of my working self. And I think that was another lesson of Saturn sixth house that I like had to learn. And then, yeah, all of that stuff does not hold anywhere near the power it once did. I think it's funny hearing yours too, because you shared how much family like held power over you, even in states. Like you felt bad never answering a phone call. Like you could not put boundaries on family because it felt like the biggest monster.
Yeah, and it was like hard
Yeah.
stop. So like it started with a lot of anxiety, but then once I got past that and realized like I was safe, right? I started setting more and more, and just learning like I think the two biggest themes that I can take from it is, one, no one's value system, no one can decide my value system for me. Like I get to choose what that is, and I get to choose what feels good and right, right? But the second one is, one thing that was thrown at me a lot growing up was like blood is thicker than water, which like objectively, sure. But at the same time, my found family, I feel like, and I'm not just talking about like the Denver locals, like people I've known in my past, like go through something big like a divorce, and the people who check on you when you're at your lowest, like, I don't know, it just means so much more. Like it really did. Like I feel like the majority of my support, I realized how big my support system actually is and how wide it's spread across like the country and even the world. Like I have friends from other countries who reached out and continue to reach out once or twice a month just to, you know, check on me, see what I'm doing, because of course I'm in like Sag mode of like, I'm just going where the wind takes me. So like every time they check in, I'm always doing something different by that point. And yeah, I'm glad I got there. I'm glad I didn't just hold on to what I had, because like being closer to the other side of it, holy cannoli, I have people who let me be my loudest self, my truest self, continue to expand into my highest self.
Yeah.
And like that's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's worth it. Like the lessons are hard to get over, but you learn that actually pushing through with hard work and perseverance ends up really mattering. It might be big feels, but the feeling of resisting is holding so much more weight than what leaning in actually will be. You can build a way bigger monster, I think, out of Saturn. And another good food for thought that I wanted to throw into this episode is that you share your Saturn with like a 2.5 year range around you. So I think it's cool generationally, like within your small group, you kind of go through a shift together. And it's wild to me looking at my group that I like graduated with, because I think Saturn gets so loud and it can completely annihilate your life during the return because you've ignored it. And then you can still go back to being toxic. We have choice, but the universe is constantly giving us little gifts that if we can listen to the higher wisdom, there's great reward within it. It's an energy exchange, but you're allowed to pick the bad route, but truly, I had 2 friends end up in the hospital at the very end of our Saturn return, closing out before it moved into Pisces. I'm Saturn Aquarius. And they had so many chances to view something from like a higher wisdom standpoint, and they chose to do the thing that they chose the old pattern, you know?
Yeah, to tack onto what you're saying, I also feel like it's important to remember when you're making choices that nothing that comes easy is going to stay easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's always something. You can't get something for nothing.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you're taking the fast track route, like it's gonna come back around.
Absolutely. And yeah, another thing just to point out, like, so Saturn's been in Pisces at the time we're recording this, and I think it's important, no matter what sign Saturn is, look at where Saturn is in the sky, because even when it's not your Saturn return, Saturn is a planet that wants you to gain that higher wisdom. It's not the bad guy. It's truly like a big helper in your evolution. So even Saturn going through Pisces, it's not my Saturn return, but it's been going through my 7th house. And I really didn't think I had a lot to still learn within relationships. And it's laughable now because the last 2 years have been insane. Like poly introduction, like just this crazy expansion in my relationship life. And yeah, like beautiful boundaries for us. Like it's just been really, I don't know. I think Saturn seems so scary, but it's only scary when you're fighting really hard to choose a version of yourself that wants to stay small.
What was that saying under the bridge with that picture of Darcy and I? You got to go through it to, what is it?
You got to flow through it to.
No, I think it's you got to go through it to get to the other side or something like that. I'll post it on our Instagram.
Yeah. Anyway, look at the sign that you were born with for Saturn. There's always lessons to be found in there. I guess I didn't mention, like, Saturn and Aquarius for me, I think held a lot of lessons about doing things unconventionally. I was very resistant to, I remember being really bitter that everyone else got to like have their mind and body health so easily, and I had to do things like this weird ass way. Like, why am I the one that has to wake up and do 10 things to be able to survive one thing? Like, I was bitter about having to do it different for a long time. And yours was way more boundary focused with the Pisces. Mine was very focused through the Aquarius lens.
Well, and it wasn't always handled with grace. Like, we're both talking about it with grace right now because we see the greater lesson.
Oh, I cried most days.
Absolutely. I spent 80% of my summer sobbing in the woods, singing sad songs.
I was panic attacking in the woods, trying to organize sticks because I have a control problem.
Yeah.
You know?
It's okay. You got to go through it to get to the other side. And we're doing it. Well, you did it. on
You
the
got it.
precipice.
You're
It's
killing it.
okay.
And then next, Saturn's going to go into Aries in May of 2025, and it'll be the Saturn Aries crew. So know that that is coming. And yeah, their themes are going to be so about willpower and yeah, just lots of independence lessons. It's going to be very interesting to witness. I thought watching the Saturn Pisces with astrology knowledge I was so excited just to see it. But yeah, the old wise daddy will keep coming around and teaching you what you need to know. Did we make jokes about it bending us over? Yes.
Yeah, listen. If I'm not laughing, I'm crying. So I'm going to laugh. And you know what? The universe, she likes to laugh with us. Like, she's cruel, but she threw in a little joke in there every single time. The night that I found out that we were getting divorced, the night after, we had already planned on going to a concert, and it was during the full moon in Pisces. Yeah. So, you know,
We let out a lot.
big cries, but also at this, like, we thought we were going for one concert and it ended up being the saddest concert of my entire fucking life. Like, if I needed to go and cry at a concert, this was the right one.
did it. We
yeah.
did it.
So, like, she's cruel, but she's funny.
I also think it's important to note for the Saturn episode too that you should always look and see if Saturn is in its house with other planets, because those planets are going to be able to manifest better post Saturn return too. And you also want to look at the aspects to it. So if there's any planet, like for V, the reason career also has played a big part in it is V used so much of that fourth house energy of her family's expectations controlling their way they were moving through the world, and then that had to shift through the return. And then for my crew, the Saturn Aquarius crew, we had Saturn square Pluto. And so the power and control lessons, you can hear it in my story sharing, were amplified like tenfold with the Saturn return. So looking at in your own chart, you can pull it up on like astrocharts.com and actually read all the aspects. If you have anything conjunct, square, opposing, trining, like you want to look at the planets. If there's oppositions and squares, that's probably been so heavy, and that's okay. If
You're doing
there's
great.
trines and if there's trines, it's probably been kind of helpful. Conjunctions, I just think the planet can function a lot better post Saturn return than what it was. And yeah,
It's funny you mentioned that, because thinking about it, like, my Saturn opposes my little
Chiron.
Virgo threesome up there. My Chiron, my moon, and my midheaven are all just making out. And Saturn opposes all of that. And I feel like a lot of the career moves I made early on in my Saturn return have definitely led me down this road. Like, I don't know if we've mentioned it, but one of the things that Jen and I connected on when we first started talking was I had just gone through, I was doing social media work at the time. Like, that's what I dove into after I left the corporate world. And I went so hard into it that I was taking this course, and I had to niche down the particular client I was going to work for. And I ended up choosing retreat clients, and they were like, that's not really one of the niches we were talking about. But when they heard me talk about it, my Gemini like sold them on it. They were like, no, you definitely seem like you know what you're talking about. And then it wasn't just quite hitting in career, and instead I found the love of my life, and
I host retreats.
She hosts retreats, and I, instead of having to focus solely on social media, we get to do fun shit like this together. And then I also get to help share my magic with the world, which has been really cool.
Yeah, I love it. So that's an
it worked out great.
example,
Yeah.
like for sure. And my square Pluto, my Pluto lands in my third house, and Saturn was in my sixth house. So for me, the third house represents like what you learn early on in life, and my limiting beliefs, my religion trauma, so much of that was tied into the problems that were manifesting in my mental and physical health issues. So as I changed what I knew by learning and talking and communicating through and getting to like change my immediate environment, themes of the third house, my sixth house started getting a lot better, and they kind of came hand in hand with that timing of my return. So that's just a couple examples for you. So yeah, do a little deep dive, do some shadow work. I think Saturn is so freaking important to be aware of and know.
And make sure you let us know in the
I want
comments
to know.
what
We
you
wanna know.
find.
We always want to know.
Yeah, we love, like, this all stems from, we were already talking about astrology, and Jen was like, let's just record a podcast.
Absolutely.
So,
Here we are. Thank you guys for listening to another episode.
Make sure to check out our Instagram if you're looking for more. And I just recreated our TikTok. So if you want to follow us on TikTok, it is Creators in the Cosmos, and there's a period in between ever. So it's Creators, period, and period, the period, Cosmos.
Woo!
Woo! And if you're looking for a little more astrological deep dive into the like more meditative magic of autumn, we did create our fall program that is available in the link in our bio, and it's called Following Mindfully. It goes through a lot of autumn magic, but there's specifically 3 sections, and each section is Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, and it just deep dives into the magic of each season for you. So
check it out.
Check it out. All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.